At the edge of a large public park, where the city's noise softened into distant murmurs and the air smelled faintly of grass and old books from the nearby street vendors, there stood a wooden bench that always seemed to have one empty space, no matter how crowded the park became, and people noticed it without quite understanding why, because even on warm afternoons when every seat was taken and strangers sat uncomfortably close, that bench somehow preserved a small, respectful gap, as if someone invisible were expected to arrive at any moment. And the bench did not creak or complain under the weight of those who sat there, it simply waited, holding its silence like a promise. Daniel Harper, a middle-aged history teacher who walked through the park every evening after work, chose that bench the day his routine finally broke, when the familiar weight of his life, lesson plans, polite conversations, and a marriage that had quietly ended without anger, settled heavier than usual on his shoulders, and as he sat down, he noticed the empty space beside him and felt an odd sense of relief, as if he had been given permission not to fill it with words, memories, or explanations, and for the first time in months, he allowed himself to sit without checking his phone or rehearsing what he would say next. Over time, Daniel realized that others were drawn to the bench for the same reason, though none of them spoke about it directly. An elderly man who brought 2 cups of coffee and drank only one, a young woman who practiced conversations out loud and then laughed softly at her own mistakes, a child who left half of his sandwich neatly wrapped and placed it beside the empty space before running off to play, and the bench absorbed these quiet offerings without judgment, as if it understood that some absences were too meaningful to erase. The park's groundskeeper once mentioned that the bench had been installed decades earlier to honor a local musician who used to sit there and play for anyone willing to listen, and when he passed away unexpectedly, people kept returning, sitting beside the place where he used to rest his instrument, until the habit became tradition, and though the plaque had faded and the music had stopped, the space remained, not as a reminder of loss, but as a recognition that connection does not always require presence. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky in quiet shades of gold, Daniel found himself speaking aloud to the empty space, not because he believed someone was there, but because the bench had taught him that it was safe to speak without interruption, and as he shared thoughts he had never said to anyone, not his students, not his friends, not even himself. The park seemed to lean in slightly, the wind softening, the city holding its breath, and when he finally stood to leave, he felt lighter, not because his problems were solved, but because they had been acknowledged. The bench remained as it always had, offering a place to sit and a place to leave open, reminding everyone who passed that some spaces are meant to stay empty, not because something is missing, but because making room is sometimes the most generous act of all, a silent testament to the unseen, the unheard, and the unspoken bonds that tie strangers together in shared understanding, where the simple act of preserving a vacancy becomes a communal gesture of respect for the stories that linger in the air, for the memories that hover just beyond touch, and for the quiet hope that in leaving a space unfilled, we honor the possibility of connection in all its forms, whether present or remembered, tangible or imagined, forever holding open a seat for the ghosts of our past, the whispers of our present, and the uncharted conversations of our future.